Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. It's Grace, and the video that I'm going to be doing today is something that I have been wanting to try my hand at for a little while, which is to create my own book tag. So this was inspired a little bit by the return of Brooklyn Nine-Nine for their final season, but I haven't actually watched any of season 8 yet. Mostly it's just inspired by the fact that I really love this show, and I thought that based on the popularity of it, it would be a really cool thing to do a book tag about. So this is, it's an original tag, but I do want to mention that I did a quick search of YouTube to see whether there was already a Brooklyn Nine-Nine book tag, and there was. But there's a couple of things. So first of all, the most recent results that I was getting for the old tag were that people had done it about 2 years ago. And when I looked at the prompts, I noticed that a lot of them focused on matching, like the prompts were prompting you to answer with characters. So I thought that it's been a while since this tag apparently sort of died, and it could use a revamp, and I thought that for my version of it, I would focus on the answers being books. So I do have my own questions, but I do want to give credit to the original creator of, like, what I assume is the original Brooklyn Nine-Nine book tag, and that is G Swizzle Books, and I'm gonna have their video linked in the description, but when I went to watch it, it's actually blocked for me because I'm assuming that they use clips from the actual show. And so I have been unable to watch their version of it because NBC has blocked it. So I'm going to leave that link, and you guys can click on it, and hopefully you'll be able to watch it. But I gathered that that was the original by watching a few other people do the old one. So with all of that preamble out of the way, this is my original / version 2.0 of the Brooklyn Nine-Nine book tag. So let's get into it. Actually, before I start, I will say that I did try to capture some of the essence of the characters with these prompts, but one of the reasons why I love this show so much is because these characters are so amazing and complex. So I tried not to overthink it too much. I tried to make this fun and fit prompts that I thought would fit the characters, but I did have, honestly, some trouble coming up with these just because, you can't just distill these characters down to one trope or characteristic, and that is one of the strengths of the show, actually, but I still had fun coming up with these. So the first prompt is Jake Peralta, and that is going to be a book or series that has amazing humor. So I don't actually tend to read a lot of comedic books, but I did come up with 3 answers for this, just that stood out to me, maybe because I don't read a lot of this type, that the ones that I read really did stand out. But the 3 that I came up with, the first one is Guards by Terry Pratchett, and I feel like that answer is pretty much self-explanatory to anybody who has read Terry Pratchett because his humor is just exquisite. It is perfect, and he does it in such a way that it blends perfectly into his storytelling. It is a lot of his storytelling, but it doesn't overwhelm it. It complements it and perfectly encapsulates who Terry Pratchett is as a writer, and I loved the humor in Guards. And the second book that I had for this one was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames, and this one doesn't have the same type of humor as Terry Pratchett does, but I did find myself being really entertained and chuckling a lot while I was reading Kings of the Wild, and the characters are just very clever and funny, and a lot of the situations that they found themselves in were just they were serious but ridiculous in ways at the same time. So I thought that that was a really funny book. And then finally, I'm literally only just going to mention the name because I have talked about this way too many times, but the third one is going to be Scott Lynch and The Gentleman Bastards, because that has some of the best dialogue I've ever read in my life, and I love it. So I'm not going to harp on about that, I promise, but those are my 3 answers for books with amazing humor. The second question or prompt in the tag is Amy Santiago, and that is going to be a book or series that has amazing female characters. And I didn't intentionally make this difficult for myself by making this a question, but when I was going through what I've read, I was thinking that there really only are a few standouts, at least for me, and the 2 that I came up with are both recent reads from this summer, actually, and that is going to be, the first one is The Sword of Kagan by M.L. Wong, and that is because in that book, we follow one of our perspectives is a mother named Misaki, and I was so invested in her story, and she just had, like, you don't see that type of perspective a lot. The things that she struggles with as a mother, she was such a complex character. You learn about her past, just like, without spoilers, but you learn about her past and what she gave up then to become a mother and to take on this role in life where, like, she then submits to her husband. It's that type of society, and you can just, like, see that her personality is not gone, even if she hides it. Like, her internal monologue was awesome. So I loved Misaki from The Sword of Kagan. And then the second one, and I didn't intentionally make both of these mothers, but the second one is the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, because this was a really interesting look at, like, how Southern women are stereotyped versus, like, how much inner strength they actually have. Like, they're stereotyped in the book as the book takes place in, like, the 80s/90s, and they are stereotyped as, like, a Southern, like, housewife type, that they do all the housework, their husbands go to work. It is very much that type of, like, stereotypical setup, but the actual story in the book and the fact that the women have a book club and become friends with each other and support each other is a very core part of the story, and, like, how hard it is to be a mother is a central theme, and, like, just wanting to protect their children, and they all do it in different ways. Like, they all have distinct personalities, they have different strengths and weaknesses, and, like, as a cast of characters, I ended up loving them so much and finding them so interesting. So I was super impressed with the female characters in the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires. The third prompt in this tag is Rosa Diaz, and that is a book with a great mystery, because, as we know, one of the running jokes in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is that nobody knows anything about Rosa's personal life. So I decided to go with a classic for this one, or at least something that I view as a classic. I think it would be considered that, maybe. And that is going to be And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. And that is, it's actually been quite a while since I read this book, and it still sticks with me because just the premise is so creepy. Having 10 people be called to an island for mysterious reasons, and they all think that they've been called there for, like, under a false pretense. They all think that they're there for a different reason, and they don't know why the other people are there, and then they're being picked off one by one. I think that And Then There Were None is a very famous book, and I think for that reason it doesn't get talked about a lot, because it's sort of one of those books that people just know about if they know about Agatha Christie, because she's one of the most famous writers of all time. But I think it just deserves a little bit of hype. I loved that book. So the fourth prompt is going to be Terry Jeffords, and that is a book that didn't turn out how you were expecting it to be. And the reason that this prompt is for Terry is because he is sort of the character that looks tough but is actually a softie. So I kind of went with that thread where you may have been expecting a book to be one thing, but it actually turned out to be something different, whether for better or for worse. So for this one, I have down The Final Empire, the first book in Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. And I'm pretty much going to leave it at that because the reason why this book was different from what I expected spoils the entire plot of the first book. But suffice it to say, I was confused about what the rest of the series was going to be about when I finished The Final Empire. The fifth prompt is Gina Linetti, which is a book that you loved that was outside of your comfort zone, because Gina can be a bit much, but she seems pretty popular anyway, despite that. So I thought that that would be a fitting prompt for her. And then I didn't put these back to back on purpose, these answers, but the answer that I actually went with for this one was The Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. And the reason for this is because I think it depends on what you define as your comfort zone, and I think that that's constantly changing. So if you asked me right now as a reader whether The Stormlight Archive is in my comfort zone, I would say like absolutely yes, because I have immersed myself in fantasy and I'm loving it. And I've been picking up series and reading really epic fantasy that I absolutely love. But the thing about The Stormlight Archive is that I started watching BookTube around April of last year, or maybe March, depending like how far into lockdown we were before I discovered that BookTube existed. And obviously The Stormlight Archive is an immensely popular series, so it didn't take long to hear booktubers start mentioning it, and so that put it on my radar. But for a while, I hadn't really been reading fantasy, or if I had, it hadn't been like big, long, epic series. I had read A Song of Ice and Fire and really enjoyed it, so this wasn't reaching like totally outside of my comfort zone. But I can tell you that when I bought The Way of Kings and it arrived, I was not expecting how long it was, but I just like, I don't know what made me do it, but I just had the compulsion to jump right in. And when I did that, I didn't want to stop. So it was not what I would consider in my comfort zone at the time that I started it, but I started it I think last July, and it just kick-started like my immersion back into fantasy, so I'm really, really happy that it did that. The sixth prompt in the tag is Charles Boyle, and that is going to be a book that has immersive descriptions. So the reason that I chose this for Charles is because he is a foodie and he loves to use very like colorful and descriptive language to describe food to people. And I thought that it would be fun to tackle that aspect of him for this prompt. So it doesn't have to be a book that specifically has immersive description about food. It's just kind of in general, like a book whose descriptions you really love that you can like sink yourself into. So I have two for this, and the first one I'll just mention briefly because I have talked about this book a lot on my channel too, but that is going to be The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman, because I just found in that book his building of the atmosphere and like the whimsical, kind of scary, but kind of, you kind of have the sense of awe as well. Like I was so immersed in that book that I just like probably would have been disoriented with the world around me if you had talked to me while I was reading that book. So that one stands out to me very much for having immersive description. And then the second one that I want to mention is a series that I am currently enjoying and in the middle of, and that is going to be The Long Price Quartet by Daniel Abraham. And so when I first started reading A Shadow in Summer, I noticed that it's funny because Daniel Abraham's prose isn't particularly flowery and doesn't particularly seem to try to do a lot, but I just am so impressed by the way that he can immerse me with so few words. I would call it like efficient, I guess, because it's just the word choice that he uses and what he does with his sentence structure, even when they're not particularly complicated. He just draws me in, and I can feel myself being in his settings and with his characters. And he is so good at that, and that is one of the reasons why I'm enjoying Long Price so much. The seventh prompt in this tag is Captain Holt, and that is going to be a book that subverts classical tropes, or a book or series. And there's one that stands out to me for this. So I am actually going to say Senlin Ascends, even though at the time of recording this, I am only just like maybe 60% of the way through the first book, because it's unlike anything I've ever read. So it's like there are probably other answers that I could give for this, but it's just so unique and so different. And there are enough familiar threads where like I feel grounded, but it's such a creative idea and I am enjoying myself so much. I obviously don't know where it's going, so like, whoops if the whole thing ends up being very tropey, but I really cannot see that happening. And to quote Alan, it is so good, guys. The 8th prompt in this tag is Hitchcock and Scully, and that is going to be a book that made you want to sit in one place until you were finished reading it. And I have a couple of answers for this. So first one I'm going to say is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, because it literally did make me do exactly that. I was at the cottage for a girls' weekend with my cousin, and I was a little bit hungover, so, you know, I had gotten into it a little bit the night before, but they were starting to drink again, and I was like, you know what, I'm not really feeling it, I'm just gonna sit here and read Words of Radiance. And so there was like a literal party going on around me while I was reading Words of Radiance, because I was like, you know what, I would rather be reading this book, and so I did. And then the second one that I have down for this is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, because despite the fact that this book is kind of slow in its pacing, I literally sat down close to Christmas last year. I was on vacation from school, I was visiting my parents. I sat down and started reading that book, and I got like halfway through it probably before bed, but I just wanted to keep reading it, and I was like, oh, for God's sake, I have to go to sleep, because I guess that's like a human need or something like that. So I went to sleep begrudgingly, and then I woke up in the morning, and the first thing I did was pick up the book again and finished it. So like within a 24-hour period where I was like, oh, gosh darn it, guess I should go to sleep. But if I didn't have to do that bodily function, I definitely would have finished that book in one sitting, because I was enjoying it so much. Okay, so the 9th prompt in the tag is going to be Peraltiago, and I did debate putting this one in here, but I feel like since the show has been out with this event for like probably 6 years, I feel like I can put this in here. And so the Peraltiago prompt is going to be a book or series that has an amazing romance. And I am not a huge romance reader myself, so I did not anticipate like how difficult it was going to be for me to find a book where I was like, oh yeah, like the romance is what I was super jazzed about in this book. Not that I haven't read books with good romances, but the one that I ended up settling on was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, because that book ripped my heart out, and I do love it. I did love it when I read it, and I still do, even though it's been a while. So that one really sticks out to me as an amazing but heartbreaking romance, since the events of the Iliad still happened. So you know how it is. Anyway, that is the last question in the tag, but the 10th prompt in the tag is the Brooklyn Nine-Nine squad, which means to tag some friends to do this. So obviously this tag can be done by anyone, but for the first round, for the inaugural tags, I did want to tag people that I know watch and like the show, Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so I have checked with these people just to see if they watch it. And so first of all, I'm going to tag Kate at the Almost Book Doctor. Her and I have talked a little bit about Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and obviously Kate is one of my good friends. I absolutely love her. If you are not subscribed to Kate, please go check her out and subscribe to her. She is just she has such a bubbly personality. She is such a fun person to be around, and I think that really comes through in her videos, and they're so enjoyable to watch. The second person that I'm going to tag is Andrew from Andrew's Wizardly Reads. This pretty much the same thing can be said about Andrew, honestly. Like, he has so much energy, and it makes his videos so fun to watch. He is such a funny guy, such a welcoming person. He is doing a lot to grow his own community in his Discord, and like, I don't know, Andrew is just a really fun and easy person to talk to, and so I know that he likes Brooklyn Nine-Nine as well because I asked him, so I am going to tag Andrew. And then the final person, another one of my close friends, is Katie from Katie without an E, and she is she's had a bit of a busy month, so I'm not pressuring her to do this tag or anything, but I did ask her if it would be okay to tag her, and she said yes. So Katie, well, first of all, if you're not subscribed to Katie, you should also go check her out because she's one of my favorite people, and you know, she can do this tag whenever she has the time, no pressure. Now that I have tagged some friends, that is going to be it for this one. I really hope that you enjoyed this. Let me know what you think about this tag and these questions. If you have anyone else that you think that I should have credited for the creation of the original tag, please let me know. I did do my research, but this is what I found, so I don't want to leave anyone out. Let me know if there's anyone else. And yeah, thank you so much for watching. Like if you liked the video, subscribe if you want to see more content from me, and I hope that you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!